So Sarah Jakes Roberts fractured her neck in April. Church says it's serious. Herniated discs, a brace for 6 weeks, almost paralyzed were her own words. And I remember watching that update thinking, okay, take your time. Nobody's rushing you. Then a few weeks later, she's back on stage. Now, I'm not a doctor. I want to say that up front because I'm about to spend a chunk of this video asking a doctor-adjacent question, and I don't want anybody in the comments acting like I said something I didn't say. I'm not diagnosing anybody. I'm asking the question a lot of you have been asking me, does that timeline track? And that's really just the entry point, because once you start pulling on this thread, the return, the outfit, the way the service was run, you end up somewhere bigger. You end up at the Woman Evolve postponement. You end up at a defamation lawsuit TD Jakes filed and then dropped. You end up at who's actually running this church. So let's go through it. Grab something to drink. This one's not short. Let's lay out what we actually know, because I want to be fair about the facts before I get into my take. April 18, Sarah Jakes Roberts is playing on a trampoline with her daughter, lands on her neck, hears several pops. She's rushed through 2 hospitals. The church's own statement uses the word fractures, plural, and describes spinal impact. She posted that she was almost paralyzed, and that 1 disc higher or lower would have been a different testimony. That is not soft language. That's the language of someone who knows how close that was to catastrophic. The church said recovery would take several weeks. She specifically said 4 to 6 weeks in a neck brace, and asked people to respect the clarity already provided and avoid speculation. I want to sit on that phrase for a second, because it matters for what I'm about to say. They asked for the speculation to stop before there was really anything to speculate about. That's worth noticing. Not damning, worth noticing. So here's my question, and it's a fair one. What does back in the pulpit actually look like at week 3 or 4 of a 6-week window? Because there's a difference between someone showing up to say a few words with a brace on, sitting most of the service, versus someone doing what looks like a full, high-energy sermon, pacing, gesturing, the whole performance style she's known for. If it was the first one, makes total sense. That's a woman who wants her community to see her okay. Totally normal. If it looked like the second one, that's where I start raising an eyebrow. Because neck fracture recovery isn't about willpower, it's about bone and disc healing on a biological clock that doesn't care how strong your faith is. I'm not saying she faked anything. I want to be really clear about that. I'm saying the optics of rapid, high-energy return next to eye was almost paralyzed is a tension that the church created by leaning so hard into the severity of the injury in their own statements. You don't get to say she almost died and then act surprised when people clock a fast comeback. Watch how she's dressed here. Watch the energy. I'm not going to sit here and rip apart a woman's outfit because that's not what this channel is about. But I will say, when you're presenting yourself as recovering from a neck fracture, there's usually a visual language that goes with that. A brace peeking out. Careful movement. And when the presentation instead reads as fully polished, fully put together, camera ready, that's a choice. Somebody made that choice. Whether that choice was hers or a team around her managing the image is genuinely an open question, and I think it's a fair one to ask on a platform where image management is basically the whole business model of megachurch media. None of this means anything sinister on its own. People push through pain for their calling all the time. That's not unique to church culture. But I'd rather you make up your own mind watching it than take my word for it, so I'd encourage you to actually go find the clip and watch the body language yourself. Now let's zoom out, because the neck surgery isn't happening in a vacuum. This church has had a rough 18 months. November 2024, TD. Jakes has what the church called a medical incident mid-sermon, live on the stream. Turns out it was serious enough that he later said, in his own words, he faced a life-threatening calamity, was rushed to the EQ, and had emergency surgery. That same week, the day after, actually, his legal team filed a defamation lawsuit against a man named Dwayne Youngblood. Here's the piece I want to walk through carefully, because it's a serious allegation involving a real person, and I'm not going to editorialize past what's actually in the public record. Youngblood had gone on a YouTube show and accused Jakes of trying to sexually assault and groom him back in the 1980s, when Youngblood was a teenager. Jakes denied it completely, told NBC's Craig Melvin, on camera, "I haven't seen this person for 40 years, and said he filed suit because enough is enough. His lawsuit also alleged Youngblood tried to extort $6 million from him before going public. Youngblood is a registered sex offender, separately convicted in an unrelated case, and Jakes' filing leaned on that heavily. Then, Youngblood's brother, Richard, filed his own affidavit making a similar allegation from decades earlier. And then, this is the part a lot of people missed. In October 2025, Jakes voluntarily dropped his own defamation lawsuit. No settlement announced publicly, no verdict. He just walked away from it after Youngblood's team said discovery would force everything into public record. I'm not going to tell you what that means. People read that dismissal in completely opposite ways. Some say it proves he had nothing to hide and just didn't want to feed the story further. Others say you don't drop a defamation case you're confident in. Both of those are opinions, not facts. The fact is, he sued, and then he dropped it before it went to discovery. You're smart, you can sit with that. What I will say plainly, this is the backdrop Sarah and Tour Roberts stepped into as senior pastors last July. They inherited a congregation that had just watched their founder nearly die on stage and get accused of decades-old sexual abuse in the same news cycle. That's an enormous amount of institutional weight to be carrying while also physically healing from your own injury. I think that context matters, and I don't think it's the whole story, but it's not nothing either. Okay, let's talk about the conference, because this is where a lot of you actually started paying attention. Woman Evolve 2026 was supposed to happen July 30 through August 1 in Atlanta. It's been pushed to July 29, 31, 2027. That is not a small delay, that's a full calendar year. The church's stated reason, they wanted to do it in fall 2026 instead, but venue availability in Atlanta, other previously booked events, and, this is the actual reason they gave, the NBA season made that window impossible. Make of that what you will. Now here's the part that actually matters. If you bought a ticket, your registration was not automatically refunded. It automatically transfers to 2027. If you want your money back instead of holding a ticket for over a year from what's publicly posted, you have to actively go request that. It's not the default. There is one exception. Girl Evolve, the youth track, is being automatically refunded. Explicitly because they don't want girls aging out of the program by the time it happens. So sit with that for a second. If refunding minors' registrations automatically was logistically possible, the infrastructure to auto-refund clearly exists. Choosing to default adults into a year-long ticket hold instead of a refund is a business decision, not a technical limitation. That doesn't mean anything improper happened with the money. I have no evidence of that, and I'm not going to imply I do. But default to holding the money, refund only on request, is a pretty standard cash flow-friendly move. And it's fair to ask why that was the default instead of the reverse. If you've got a ticket sitting in limbo right now, I'd actually recommend going and checking the refund policy yourself directly through Woman Evolve's official channels rather than trusting a recap video, including this one. So where does that leave us? Nothing I've laid out today proves fraud, proves a faked recovery, or proves guilt in the Youngblood matter. I want to say that as directly as I can, because it's easy for this kind of video to feel like a verdict, when really what I've given you is a timeline and a handful of questions that timeline raises. What I do think is fair to say, this is an institution that has asked its followers over and over in the last 2 years to trust the official statement and not speculate, while also being an institution whose official statements keep needing a follow-up. A near-fatal medical crisis. A neck fracture. A filed then dropped lawsuit. A conference pushed a full year with a refund policy that defaults against you. Individually? Explainable? Stacked up like this? I understand why people are asking questions. I'm not telling you what to think about Sarah, or Tour, or Bishop Jakes. I'm telling you to actually go read the primary sources, the church's own statements, the court filings, the Woman Evolve FAQ, before you form an opinion, instead of just taking my word for it or anyone else's. Drop where you land in the comments. And if you want me to keep tracking this as it develops, subscribe, because I don't think this is the last update we're getting on any of these threads. I'll see you in the next one.